welcome to Live 7 tonight. An 1899 provision, it is already embedded in treaties every state has ratified. Does it govern autonomous weapons without a new treaty? That is the question for tonight. It is live. I'm available on live chat right now. Imagine a diplomatic conference. The year is 1899. Delegates from the world's major powers are in The Hague, negotiating the first modern treaty on the laws of war. A disagreement threatens to collapse the entire effort. A Russian diplomat proposes a way forward. A single provision referring to the principles of humanity and the dictates of public conscience as the governing standard for everything the treaty cannot explicitly resolve. The conference is saved. The provision is adopted. Now, tonight's puzzle for each one of you. 129 years later, does that provision now, embedded in instruments nearly every state on earth has ratified, already impose legal obligations on the development and deployment of autonomous weapons systems? And does it impose them even on states actively blocking a new binding treaty on those very systems? Now hold that question. We will resolve this by the end of this presentation, like always. But before I go on, your prediction in the comments right now, during the live session, during the live premiere, while I am there on live chat here with you. Can a 127-year-old clause already govern a weapon that didn't exist when it was written? Yes or no? Live chat, drop your call. I'll read the room before the reveal. And I'll tell you now one thing. The answer, it surprises almost everyone who studies this. Good evening and welcome back to the AI Law, Global Security, AI Risks and Liability, our channel. And this is the live premiere series, Thursdays until Sundays every week at 8 PM CST. It is live chat right now. I'm your host, Nupur Mitra, a techno-legal analyst and a lawyer by profession. And this is your live analysis at the intersection of artificial intelligence, international law, and the governance gaps between them. Over 6 consecutive evenings here live with you, we have built a precise architecture. Live 1, domestic law for AI infrastructure. Live 2, the first binding AI treaty, coverage optional. Live 3, the EU AI Act, reach exceeding enforcement. Live 4, the UN's governance deficit, coordination without enforcement. Live 5, autonomous weapons in the field, an accountability gap, no binding treaty. Live 6, the persistent objector doctrine. States may remain outside an emerging customary norm by objecting formally and consistently during its formation. Live 6 left us with a precise question. If the persistent objector doctrine can insulate certain states from an emerging customary norm on meaningful human control, is there a legal pathway that does not depend on a new norm crystallizing? A pathway already embedded in the existing treaty law those states have already ratified. Tonight, we examine that pathway. It was written in 1899. Its author was a diplomat trying to save a peace conference, the Martens Clause. Let us build the architecture from the source. The Martens Clause owes its name to Fyodor Martens, a diplomat and jurist who represented the Russian Empire at the first Hague Peace Conference in 1899. The conference faced a specific problem. delegates could not agree on the legal status of civilians in occupied territory who took up arms against an occupying force. The disagreement, it threatened to prevent any treaty at all. Martens proposed a solution. Rather than resolving the specific dispute, the provision he drafted referred the question to a higher standard, the principles of humanity and the requirements of the public conscience. Legal historians have documented the Martens Clause as a compromise that broke the deadlock and allowed the 1899 Hague Convention to be adopted. The provision first appeared in the preamble to the 1899 Hague Convention II. It reappeared in the 1907 Hague Convention IV. Versions of it were incorporated into all four 1949 Geneva Conventions. And its most cited modern form, it appears in Article 1, Paragraph 2 of the 1977 Additional Protocol 1, which reads, "In cases not covered by this protocol or by other international agreements, civilians and combatants remain under the protection and authority of the principles of international law derived from established custom, from the principles of humanity, and from the dictates of public conscience." Three components: established custom, principles of humanity, dictates of public conscience. In July 1996, the International Court of Justice addressed the Martens Clause directly in its advisory opinion on the legality of the threat or use of nuclear weapons. The court, it referenced the clause explicitly and engaged it as part of the applicable law. The court did not conclude that the Martens Clause alone prohibited nuclear weapons, but what the ICJ confirmed was that the clause was operative, not a historical artifact, but living international law. That 1996 advisory opinion remains the most authoritative judicial treatment of the clause to date. The legal meaning of the Martens Clause is, as one ICRC analysis has put it directly, inevitably contested. Three distinct interpretations exist. Each has different consequences for autonomous weapons. The first, the narrow interpretation. Under this reading, the clause simply reaffirms that states remain governed by existing customary international law. It adds no independent obligations. Powerful states have historically preferred this interpretation, one that renders the clause, in effect, redundant. For autonomous weapons, the consequence is direct. States that deny the existence of a customary norm requiring meaningful human control can argue the clause adds nothing. The persistent objector doctrine remains their primary shield. The second, the moderate interpretation. Under this reading, the clause operates as an interpretative tool. It clarifies how existing IHL principles apply in novel situations, but does not independently establish new prohibitions. Writing in a Labour Institute analysis in March 2026, Gerald Mako, a research affiliate at Cambridge, stated directly that the legality of autonomous weapons under IHL ultimately hinges on their compliance with the core principles set out in the 1949 Geneva Conventions and the 1977 Additional Protocol 1, distinction, proportionality, precaution, and the Martens Clause. On this reading, the clause, it provides a moral as well as legal benchmark. Systems lacking meaningful human control or risking indiscriminate harm can be deemed unlawful where they violate humane standards because the existing treaty architecture already requires it. The third, the broad interpretation. Under this reading, the clause is an independent source of law. This interpretation was advanced around the CCW group of governmental experts meeting in August 2018 by Bonnie Doherty, a senior researcher at Human Rights Watch and a lecturer at Harvard Law School's International Human Rights Clinic. Her argument was direct. Fully autonomous weapons, she stated, would fail this test on both counts. On the principles of humanity as inanimate machines, they could not appreciate the value of human life and the significance of its loss, and would base life and death determinations on algorithms objectifying their human targets. On the dictates of public conscience, virtually all states speaking at the CCW meeting have stressed the need to maintain human control over the use of force. That argument was made in 2018. Since then, 166 nations voted for action at the UN General Assembly in December 2024. 156 nations voted again at the first committee in November 2025. The evidentiary basis for the dictates of public conscience argument has grown considerably stronger since Doherty made it. Here is the constraint serious legal scholarship maintains. Fyodor Meron, one of the foremost scholars of international humanitarian law, whose 2000 article on the Martens Clause in the American Journal of International Law is one of the most frequently cited analysis of the clause, cautioned that its references to principles of humanity and dictates of public conscience cannot, on their own, delegitimize weapons and methods of war, except in the clearest cases. The ICJ itself, in the 1996 opinion, did not hold that the clause prohibited nuclear weapons. It recognized it as operative. It did not make it dispositive. The Martens Clause is a standard setter, a moral and legal benchmark, an interpretative anchor that requires IHL to remain responsive to humanitarian principles even when specific treaty text is silent. But under the moderate and narrow interpretations, the ones preferred by the states whose most actively developing autonomous weapons, it is not by itself a blanket prohibition. Its independent legal force depends on which interpretation governs. There is, however, one structural observation no analysis can avoid. Unlike a new treaty, which requires negotiation, signature, and ratification, and unlike an emerging customary norm, which is subject to the persistent objector doctrine, the Martens Clause is already embedded in the Geneva Conventions, the most widely ratified instruments in human history. The states blocking a binding treaty on autonomous weapons have already ratified those instruments. They cannot object their way out of what they have already accepted. The question is not whether they are bound by the Martens Clause. It is what precisely they are bound to do. Before I resolve this, cast your vote on the core question live right now. Does the Martens Clause already ban weapons that kill without human control? Or do we still need a brand new treaty to do it? Comment 1 for it already binds them, the law exists. Comment 2 for we still need a new treaty. One word. This is the exact fault line dividing governments right now. So pick a side. Now, let's get back to tonight's puzzle. An 1899 provision embedded in instruments nearly every state has ratified. Does it already impose legal obligations on states developing and deploying autonomous weapons today? The answer, grounded in verified sources, is yes, under any interpretation above the narrow. And even the narrow interpretation does not eliminate the obligation, it simply limits it to existing customary law. Under the moderate interpretation, the most legally defensive current position reflected in the most recent Lieber Institute scholarship, the Martens Clause operates as a compliance benchmark. Autonomous systems must align with humanitarian standards as interpreted through IHL. This is not a future obligation, it is a present one. Under the broad interpretation, the overwhelming evidence of the dictates of public conscience, in state declarations, civil society consensus, and 2 consecutive UN General Assembly supermajorities may itself constitute independent legal grounds for restricting full autonomous systems. Under this reading, no new treaty is required. The legal basis already exists. So the consequent question now, does it impose those obligations even on states actively blocking a new binding treaty? Yes. Because the Martens Clause is already in the treaties those states have ratified. The persistent objector doctrine operates against customary norms in formation. It does not undo treaty obligations already accepted. The Martens Clause is the most ancient tool available for governing autonomous weapons. It doesn't require a new political consensus to become operative. It already is operative. What it lacks under any interpretation is an adjudicating body with clear jurisdiction to enforce it against a state deploying autonomous weapons in active conflict. And that is the final structural gap this series has been building forward. Tonight's takeaway is this: over 7 consecutive evenings with you, we've mapped a complete architecture of governance instruments, domestic law, regional treaties, continental regulation, UN coordination, weapons law, customary law doctrine, and now an 1899 provision embedded in universal treaty instruments. Each tool has reach. Each has a limit. The Martens Clause occupies a precise position. It is the governance instrument that does not depend on new political consensus. It is already law. The contest is over its interpretation, and interpretation is itself a legal and, of course, a political act. UNIDIR, the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research, published a background paper on 6th March 2025. Its finding was precise. All contributions to the multilateral debate stem from the common starting point that IHL applies to the development and use of LAWS. But divergences of both form and content persist. The common starting point is agreed. The legal conclusions drawn from it are not. That gap between agreed starting point and contested conclusion is the terrain the Martens Clause occupies. Live 8 is next Thursday, 6 p.m. this time, not 8 p.m. anymore, because I want more people to come in. even from outside the US. So be here. I'll wait for you. See you on next Thursday, Live 8. If tonight's conversation added precision to how you think, please do subscribe to this channel. Follow me on my Substack, LinkedIn, Instagram, and please do join my mailing list, that is thoughtleadinnovate.com/newsletter. So join this conversation with me.